Close.
Seen. He's gone to the trees. One down.
Stop resisting! Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel, welcome to my review of Grey Zone Warfare. So, when I do reviews on the channel, I generally have one objective standard. It's a low bar, but that's the point. Everything should pass it. It gives everything a bit of an even comparison. And that would be that for every $5 Australian a game asks of me, I ask it gives me a good hour of solid gameplay fun. I would call that fair, and anything beyond that is just good value. So this is going for $50 Australian, so I'd call it 10 hours would be fair and even. I've already put over 30 hours into it, so suffice it to say, I think this game is very much worth your time and worth your money. That is, of course, if this niche can grab you or even find you. Chances are if you're watching this video, you might well be, and don't take it personally, a PvP Tarkov sweat. And arguably this game is not made for that type person, and yet it is attracting them en masse. Because, well, I mean, there is a lot of meta stuff going on at the moment. Specifically, Nikita, the head of the Tarkov studio, as I can tell from afar, is busy trying to set his entire studio on fire. They've done some very strange things with the way that they're overcharging and gouging people, and he's spending every moment on Twitter trying to distract people with some asset stolen flip controversy. And my point is, what could have been, you know, a pretty bad misstep from the studio has turned into kind of weeks of them just making Tarkov burn brighter, I guess. This game has sort of got a lot of secondary popularity or interest off of that, but let's just be very explicit at the front. It's not a PvP game. It has PvP in it, but the focus, and this is from the developers' mouths, is that it's very much supposed to be PvE with a sprinkling of PvP, which is a little bit of a cop-out, and I honestly think it's more of a sales pitch, the PvP, and they will either patch it to such a point where it's super low impact, or they'll remove it eventually, or actually maybe they'll buckle to the unexpected popularity of the PvP expats that are fed up with Tarkov. And maybe they buckle and PvP it up, which would be a bit tragic to see because you've already got Tarkov. It's kind of cool to see an extraction type shooter like this focusing more on PvE. But, you know, I don't want to stick around on the PvP stuff too much, but it's kind of a broken system. It doesn't work very well. It's built around an honor system from presumably what they thought would be a small and niche community, where there's not really a lot of penalties for just shooting your teammates in the back and stealing their shit. And ambushing people, jumping on and off of helicopters in sort of neutral areas, and they've already started trying to patch it and minimize the impact, giving people invulnerability windows, but a lot of it just doesn't really work. And you can tell that that's probably the weakest part of the game because it's an afterthought, and I truly think it's one of those things that if you release a PvE extraction military shooter like this, and you said there is no PvP in it at all, you are going to get probably 1/8 of the interest of Tarkov people coming for a look. So I feel like they just sprinkled it in there as a pseudo marketing strategy, and looks like it's working, to be honest. So yeah, I'm playing with a bunch of the boys, 30 hours in. We have done a bit of PvP. I haven't really been on the short end of the stick, but it has always left a dirty taste in my mouth where, like, you're forced to, you can hear a helo coming in and you know it's the enemy teams because you can't see a friendly on the map. So you need to react, you need to deal with it, and kind of drilling dudes as they get off a helo with their pants down, like, is just, that's not pleasant, that's not cool. You know, I don't really want to visit that upon my fellow gamer, and just broadly speaking, it doesn't really work. So you can play on PvE only servers, and we've kind of started doing that more, and it's not negatively affected the game. In fact, I would encourage people to probably try that from the beginning. Don't worry about PvP. So now that I've got that out of the way and got all the angry Tarkov sweats that want it to be Tarkov 2.0, well, angry, I guess we can move on. I'll cover real briefly. I did an overview of this, and I had huge rubber banding issues, and they were server-side issues. It's very obvious. And again, same thing. This game is kind of going gangbusters. I don't think they expected it to be this successful, and it's wonderful, right? That's really good for them, and good for the player base. But when you've got a smaller indie to AA niche type game, and the servers get put under such load, you're going to have issues. So while you can go back to my overview and see the rubber banding B-roll, it was pretty awful. A lot of that has abated. I will say, being someone in Oceania in Australia, they have grossly misunderstood the popularity in our region, and they only have like maybe 1 or 2 servers available in the server system. So I've been playing in Southeast Asia a lot, and generally speaking, that's been fine. Occasionally you get a little bit of hiccups during peak, but if you are an Australian and you want to play this, don't even bother with the Oceania servers, not at the time of this recording. I would say go Southeast Asia and you'll be fine. So yeah, it's going to draw comparisons to Tarkov. PvE Tarkov is a kind of derivative way to explain it, though it has some influences. The setting is kind of Ghost Recon-y, I suppose, but that's where it stops and starts as far as aesthetic. You know, it's set in some sort of, you know, Southeast Asian area like Indonesia or even Vietnam or something like that. I haven't really thought too much about it, but it doesn't really play out like Ghost Recon. It very much does play out like a methodical, slow-paced, team-based shooter. The slower you go, the faster you go, if that makes sense. Funnily enough, kind of reminds me of my time with Ready or Not. I'm playing with a lot of the blokes that I played that with as well. The same thing as well. I'm not really into these sweaty type games, and I think a lot of people that might look at them and go, oh, not for me, too hardcore, you might find that you have more overlap with me than you realize. And so yeah, Ready or Not's another recommendation I would say if you can get a bunch of boys together that want to give sweating a bit of a go. But this has some of those principles in there. But funnily, I mentioned Ghost Recon. This game reminds me a lot more of The Division in some ways, not necessarily in gameplay, but kind of in world construction, because I wouldn't even say world building. It very much feels like this one contiguous world, so it feels MMO-ish. I know that they're doing sharded servers with, you know, probably like 60 players on each, something like that. I haven't looked into it too much, but the game really sort of leans into you have your home base and then you sort of call in a chopper to where you're going and you sort of flow out, and there's no load screens or anything like that. So it maintains this contiguous open world mouthfeel, which does a real lot of heavy lifting for the general vibe. And it's what it gets right that Tarkov doesn't. Maybe Tarkov will do this one day, but Tarkov feels incredibly disjointed as these small little instances that are, you know, almost team deathmatch-esque. You know, you have X players and it's all very boundary driven. And then you go to your stash headquarters, but you know, it is disjointed. It feels like 2 different games stuck together. I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but I am comparing the apples and oranges. And this game gets the other side of it really right, and it tricks you into sort of feeling like an open world. Even though, on paper, the way it actually manifests mechanically is very much like the Tarkov formula. Go to base, fly out, go to mission, fly back to base. It's also worth mentioning that this game has a flow state pace that I haven't really seen in anything else before, and it is best described with the joke tautology that keeps coming up in my group of when this game goes, it goes. Anyone that's played this game will probably understand what I mean by such a dumb statement. The pacing of this has this concertina or bathtub curve, or visualize it however you want, but there is a stop and go to the flow state, and you will be moving through a town, slowly checking, you know, corners and doing your comms and all that, and it will be a calm before the storm game. But eventually, and occasionally you'll kill some sporadic dudes and all that, right? But there is this tension, heart in your mouth feeling that only gets more noticeable and fun and kind of addicting the more you play the game and the more you realize how lethal and kind of Black Hawk Down, ops going sideways this game goes as a design philosophy. And I don't know if they've done it by accident or whatever, but it is the best part of this game. And what I'm trying to say is it will pop off at some point. You'll shoot a dude, but that will aggro a dozen guys in the area coming at you from all cardinal directions. And all of a sudden, it is absolute valor under fire. Everyone is comms, everyone is fighting on all cardinal directions. Someone's going to ground because he's bleeding out. Maybe a dude's been shot and gone into a coma and you're trying to deal with him. You know, someone needs to re-ammo, and it just really puts you to the test. And it, like the strangest comparison, it reminds me almost of the way the AI director kind of revolutionized things in Left 4 Dead. Perhaps that's a touchstone people will get, especially if you're a bit older. The idea that you will be moving along comfortably, let's say, and then all of a sudden you're getting belted with the game at its absolute primo. And if it was one more than the other than what it currently is, it would be to the detriment of the game. If this game was just non-stop, like a Doom Eternal, bloody just bang, 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 nothing against any of those sort of games, then you would lose the tension from this. And likewise, if it was more just even-handed and boring and didn't just pop all of a sudden, well, it would be kind of boring. It gets into almost horror territory. You're in there to do your mission, and you're like, well, we could go over to this house. We know that there's crates there to loot. Yeah, but, you're sort of dancing around it. You're playing with fire. And you got to be really careful that you don't get that fake Dutch courage where, I haven't been hit. I've killed a billion dudes. And then someone's going to hit you in the neck eventually, and you're just going to go down immediately like a sack of spuds. So there's a flow state without even really talking about the specific gunplay or the sort of what you would call a traditional gameplay loop, which is all solid, by the way. It works well, but it doesn't necessarily do anything super different. But that's not the selling pitch. It is the loop above that. It is the meta loop. But even then, there would be a loop above that. It's like the interim loop, because the meta loop would be things like doing missions, customizing guns back home, that sort of stuff, playing around in base, making your kits. So it's this interim loop in the middle that sits between those two that ties together the gunplay and the locomotion through the level. And it is so good, and it gets it better than bloody anything. And that's why I keep coming back. Talking about the minor loop, I suppose, main loop, whatever you want to call it. There is a gameplay element, which is the sort of med system, which is fairly robust. And again, I haven't played Tarkov in a long time. I don't know where that's at. But there is a sort of triage to it that I remember Tarkov not having. Again, Tarkov, you could just sort of hotkey everything, and you get into a fight and you just jam bloody adrenaline pins in or pills and then just fight through and that sort of stuff. In this, it has multiple different injuries and a sort of injury chart, and I'm not going to go into it too much, but you do have to figure out, well, am I going to use a tourniquet? And am I going to splint? How bad is it? How bad is the bleed? Can I fight through? My dude's coughing, or maybe he's got some sort of stomach issue, so you pull up the health display and have a look, and you start to learn the color systems. Oh no, I've got like a orange stomach, which means like I've actually got internal organ damage, so I need to use a surgery kit to fix it. So there is overlap with Tarkov, but I feel like the telegraphing and the kind of lack of super hotkey heavy gameplay makes it a bit more deliberate and a bit more like a combat medic, as opposed to pressing a fucking health potion to fix your dude. I am aware that there is a shortcut system. You can put things in your pockets, and if you hold down H, you can kind of scroll through, and that works. I think if they ever made it a numbered hotkey system, I put bandage in 1, tourniquet in 2, that would actually wreck the magic here, and it would just become the Tarkov system. So I kind of enjoy that there are some hurdles to get over it. There will be panic under fire. One of the dudes in the squad will be like, oh god, I'm dying, what's going on? And you'll be like, stop the bleeding, or he'll be like, what's on your screen? It's like, I've got 2 blood drops as a symbol. It's like, all right, we'll get a tourniquet, that sort of thing. But then it's also even made better by, there is a health bar component to it, which is how much blood you have in your system, and you can blood bag people. You will regenerate blood as well, but if it drops below a certain threshold, you're going to start getting like dizzy effects and that sort of thing. It can really affect you. So you really have to, and it moves beyond that micro loop into the intermediary loop of, okay, well look, can you punch through? Can you just take headache pills or pound water? Do you need another 500 mil of blood? Because maybe we don't do it and we risk it. Do we need to extract? So it starts sort of bleeding into the meta consideration of how you're going to play through. And all of this shines especially well in multiplayer with the coma system. So if you don't actually get killed, but you get into such a down state where your dude is fucked but he's not dead, you can then have your mates come across and triage and try and bring you back from the brink. So you obviously plug the holes, stop the bleeding, and try and get the bloke up. But the whole idea of it does lean into the Western oorah fighting mentality, especially from a Hollywood perspective of, let's say you're a 4-man fire team and one of the dude goes down in a coma state. One of the other guys is going to go down and commit to trying to med him up. So you're going to have dirty cross comms of a 2-man team trying to resurrect this dude and another 2-man team trying to hold down the firefight. And it really does capture that sort of Hollywood-ism of military leave no man behind vibe that I have never seen in any other game ever, right? Tarkov very much leans into the lone wolf mentality, which is fine and has its appeal. And usually when you move up the scale towards more team-based interplay, you're just starting to move into points and scoreboards, even attrition to a point. I play a lot of Hell Let Loose in that, and people don't really play medic in that because it doesn't really benefit the team quite as much. So this game actually sits in a really good sweet spot that I didn't know that I desperately wanted to exist. And it really does create this emergent, great gameplay. Like, there is world building, there is lore, there's some sort of weird thing going on. There's a ground zero, looks like a nuclear site, but I think that's all early access and you can't get there yet. But, you know, I'm intrigued by the world building for sure. But the emergent gameplay of how the systems, like I said, for example, coma and med systems, interplay with the stop-go flow state of enemy encounters, it creates one of the coolest emergent systems where all you have to do is log on, get the boys together. It almost doesn't fucking matter what mission you're doing, where you're going, or what you're doing, because you're there for the loop and the sort of camaraderie under fire with the boys. Anyway, if it sounds like I'm gushing, it's because I am. I really think that this game at a fundamental gameplay level really knocks it out of the park for me. And my hope is that I can reach the audience that needs to be reached because, again, and it's nothing against people that desperately want this to be another PvP Tarkov shooter, but that's not what this is. And they're not the right audience. And the hope is once Tarkov unfucks itself, not that I'm saying I want to gatekeep or send them on their way, but hopefully they go back to the game that they love and start enjoying themselves again. And Greyzone retains and keeps the audience that it's clearly aimed at. There is something cool happening here. Reaching the correct audience is the real hurdle, especially when I truly think that the dudes that would revel in this might turn their nose up at this, thinking it's just another hardcore Tarkov game. And in many ways, it kind of isn't. It's a great co-op experience that is worth checking out. Anyway, longer video, but my reviews tend to be. I hope I haven't waffled too much, and I think I've covered what broadly makes this game brilliant, and hopefully the pitch works and you go and pick it up. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.